In this video, I'm going to try to explain some of the Smart HUD objects that I tried to put together to make, making things in general a lot easier. Everything's opening on my other screen. I'm trying to bring it over. So, it might be easier if I just do this real quick. I'm going to have a default widget. I can delete that later. Alright, so we have objects that, we don't want to have to program for every iteration of usage. So I have stuff like this button list that has, well enough examples in it for a list of buttons. I can't see really having these many, but it's a starting example. You can have it be configurable, so it will automatically stretch down based on what size it is. You can reset the list to put whatever you want to go in here. Along with this, you can also go in here. Excuse me. The NDS stands for normal, disabled, and selected. And I think I also have another state which is highlighted, which I haven't added to this list. Let me check the images. Yes, it's highlighted. So you can change your button types that appear on these buttons based on whatever button template you want to have, and it'll swap out the buttons for these. You can have different fonts for each of these different type setups. And well, for each of these state setups. So like right here, you can see that this is the font for being highlighted and selected. And then these are the normal font for, the normal positions for it. So if I go back and add something here, I think for at least a demo purpose, there we go. I have a highlighted here at this index and a disabled here at this index. So that way you can see what all of your different states of your buttons will be when you actually use them in the system. Along with that, if you want to, you can add certain icons to those individual, you can add an icon to the individual entries. So if for some reason, you had a list of things that had certain icons to go along with them in their button list, you can put that there and it'll automatically populate the holder for an icon to go along with your actual button menu. Let me just delete this, not needed. You can control what sound it makes when you select the button, and also you control what background shows up when it's on screen. So if you don't want a background, you can just remove it. It's a completely dynamic object for whatever you need it to be. You can even change the justifications of the text on the button if you want to. And I'm not sure why this is set here, because I don't think this is needed to be populated for disabled buttons. I might have duplicated a variable and renamed it, but I do not think that this needs to be here for disabled buttons. But normally this is what you would set to say that, hey, this certain index in here is just not activated at all. So if you have some kind of logic on your side that says, hey, index 3 shouldn't be enabled, you can say, hey, here's my enabled list. Update your display to say these buttons are disabled. So that way when you go and click it with your mouse or execute it with your controller or whatever, it will do a active check to see if that should be enabled and not do a callback if it's disabled. But even handling like moving up and down the list is already programmed into the object. So if we go over here and we pull it out, we should have like a general set of functions that we can call. We can move the menu forward, backwards. That's just going up and down the list. So if you have a controller, you can use that to execute moving up and down the list with the controller. You can process the press event with the controller, or when you click it, it will give a call back to an event that you can catch to know, hey, which index did you just click? Which is also the report button press. That is what can be used as a bindable. Let me verify. Bind button press. And when you bind button press, create event, it says, hey, we need a function to go here that needs an integer, that will accept an integer. And then what this will do is anytime I click a button or activate a button at a given index, it'll call this function and say, hey, I've just been activated with this event. Handle what you need to do for this index. So that way, this can be a smart object that you can use in many different ways without having to manually place buttons in a list, try to make each of them set up in different ways and things like that, just to be able to have a button menu that you can operate in general. The dialog box is set up in a similar way. You can just throw that wherever you need a dialog box. It's got set up for putting characters into a 3D plane, just like a 2D plane, just like a date sim would be. It's all self-contained. It has all the things that's needed for like an event to happen. So it can black out the background, things like that, all contained within this object. The dynamic button that I use in the button panel and some other places, where this button will automatically stretch to, well, it won't stretch up and down, but it will stretch left and right, depending on what you want it to be. You can test out the different states of the button by going through these different states. If you have textures that you want to be for the different button states, see, it went away as soon as I applied it, but if I have these different states, I can put a different texture on each of these states. And then as I go to those different states, it'll show that on here. So that's the disabled state, that's the selected state, that's the hover state, if I can select it. So if you just want a button that can be fully programmable and things like that, you can do that. You can say, hey, this button has an ID of 3. So that way when you select it, it's going to say, hey, 3 was pressed. Please let someone else know. Again, you can have an image icon on the side here, just like the other one does, just like the button list does. It just sends that information down to the button level so it can set up the button however you need the button to be set up. You can give it a title. And you can also give it a font list based on, all the other data that's in here. You can give it a shadow offset that will, move the text around. I pretty much use this just to like shift it a little bit. Color opacity, I'm not sure if that's actually used here. It might not be used anymore. But that's just the general sense of this dynamic button. It's a button that you can just fully customize however you need it with whatever font you need to be on it and run with it pretty much. Let's see what else. So we got an equip widget. See, so this will allow you to set equipment information to this. So if I can move this over. These are the default values for this item that can be configured in a list, which I actually have as well. But it just sets it up to where each of your different components can be reused and remanufactured to be whatever you want to. And this specifically can hold information about a given equipment item for it to actually, load and generate whatever it needs to do. This is another button list that I tried to make. This one does work, but it's not as good as the button list. I still use this in some places, but mostly I use the button list for the rest of the other smart buttons. I think I used this list, this general list inside of like inventory displays, to where you don't need it to actually look like a button. You just need it to be like a background for displaying items and listed things. Similar to the equipment, this is the one for the item panel. So that way all your item information can be stored in here, and it can be put in any kind of like list box to control. This is like one single element of this list box that I just showed you earlier. A pop-up message, just pretty much like anytime you need a pop-up message, you can just throw this in. You can give it a time to be awake. It can take information, like it can take button presses to be able to make it go away. If you push it onto the control stack for the player controller, or you can just have it spawn and then it has a definite time that you can set to it for it to go away, for a general pop-up box, a timed pop-up box. I have an odometer element, which I don't think you can see in this individual state. No, you can't see in this original state. But this is part of the odometer that I use for the enemy HP. And pretty much what it lets you do is you can either use it to rack numbers up, or you can use it to dynamically turn a number into graphical text. So anytime you see the people get hit, I'm using that odometer object to be able to get a graphical representation, a highly graphical representation of an actual number. We got scrolling marquees. I use this as an example inside of the when the player levels up when they're not in battle. Just whatever you want this to scroll through, you can just set information to it, and then automatically it'll scroll whatever tick information you want to go through. I got a stat element that can, stretch and mold to whatever you put it into, but you can just say, hey, what type of stat are you? What's your value? Is this a increasing or decreasing stat? I use that in many different places that you've probably seen already. And then you have a store inventory, which is used in the store to be able to pretty much display any kind of like selling inventory that you have in your system. Let's see if I can find. I don't think this rack will work without it running into the system, but in general, the way this works is each of these numbers are set to be able to rack up to a 9-digit number, and when you set the number, when it comes in, it sets up the odometer and the order of operations, and then what you can do is say, hey, I want you to advance to this number, or I want you to set the number directly to this, and it'll either rack to that number, or it will immediately set the odometer object to the number on screen. Well, to the number desired. And let me try to see if I can actually call this on the pre-construct. I might not be able to, but let's see. Set number to 9999. Compile. There we go. So there you go. There's your odometer number, and you can use that anywhere you want to actually like display some kind of like generic odometer. and this should be an individual odometer object. So this should be like one single number. And again, you can change the color through the change color function. And the odometer only just uses this. So if you want to set up your own graphical representation of a number, you just have to make sure that each segment has the equal number of pixels. And it's just going to take whatever the size of that texture is, divide it by, the number of segments, and then use that to be able to offset the number for whatever you want it to display as. I have a list of font materials in here. It's just the same thing that makes this look this way for the numbers. I have a gradient material function that lets you come in and just apply different gradient looks to your text to give it a little bit more depth to it than just like the basic flat text in general. Some people told me that I may have if I use too many of these, I'll have some kind of slowdown in the system. Thus far, I haven't seen much of a slowdown that was caused by this. I've seen it caused by other things, but I have not seen these these material functions slow down any kind of rendering of my HUD or anything like that. Now, in general, if you use too many text boxes on your screen or just images in general, if I put 200 images on the screen, something's going to slow down. But so far so good. Let's see. So here we have the actual list of equipment. So no matter what the equipment is, if I can actually stretch this up, come on. So no matter what the equipment is, you can send in your list of equipment for whatever filter you have for whatever page you're on, and it will populate whether the item is equipped, whatever equipment icon it has, and the name of the icon. You can ignore the 20% or whatever gauge that I have over here. That's what I'm using in my system to be able to pretty much if you play Final Fantasy 14, it's kind of close to spirit binding an item. So after a while of using it in battle, you can deconstruct it into something, and that's what I use for the percentages. So I just left it there. Item display is the same. You can send it a list of items that you want it to display, and it will populate this list based on the number of available visible spaces there are. This object has the ability to be able to automatically go through and do a loop around for pages. So if you want to go to the next page, you can say, hey, go to the next page, go to the next selection, and then it'll automatically handle the loop arounds that it needs to be able to display all of your items on the screen. So that way you don't have to go through and manually program the mess that is item selection, keeping track of how many items you have in the list, making sure that when you use an item up that it automatically updates the list and reduces all the little columns down. This automatically takes care of it, and if you wanted to change how it looks, you can go in, add other features to it however you want to. This should actually be the exact same thing with the full display. Let's see. So this is the little icon that shows whether you're equipped or not. Just a little modular piece that can squish and stretch to however you need it to be on screen. So that way, you can get multi-uses out of it. This is the same thing as the item display, but for stores. So you can get the sell value for whatever equipment or item type it is to be able to display that in the store. So if you want to make your own inventory, you can come in, set this. definitely probably change the font that I have in here, since that's not dynamic or wrapped by a scale box. And then you can just fit that to wherever you need it to be and get that working inside of whatever store inventory that you want. While I'm here, every single interface that I have, that I use, that I want to be able to control, has to be a child of the UMG push pop-up master. What this will allow me to do is, no matter what HUD I push down to the control HUD, that it can send all my button inputs for my controllers up to that HUD interface. And then all I have to do is just call the event dispatcher in the actual HUD to be able to get these informations without any kind of crazy passing or catching an event and firing off some other event and things like that. It just makes it like just one step to be able to get instant input up into my HUD objects, or my widget objects, if you want to say it. Field location. What is this? Oh, these are just icons. Do I have any other smart objects? I think that's about it. The only thing that's really left is just all the different pieces of the HUDs that you all can go through. You can look at the character customization to see how I have that all set up. How I have everything set up in the stores. I mean, all of that should be pretty much straightforward. The event page holds every single thing that can happen in the event, from the option panel to the store to the end to dialogue, character customization, and depending on what callback that we get from the game state, we just show that given page based on whatever callback that we're processing, and then that automatically enables itself inside of the event flow. The game screen, just pretty basic. One thing I want to show off in the HUD, the battle HUD, is the fact that in the active bar, which I probably need to rotate, alright, so it's going to be that way. So in the active bar, the only thing it does, it doesn't necessarily control the enemies going across. We're actually just reaching into the actor and pulling out their information. So we're trying to see, when we update their progress across there, we're trying to see, hey, what are you doing? Are you attacking? Or are you waiting for battle? If you're attacking, how far away are you from your target? From your target minimum attack distance based on your current action. Are you anywhere close to it? If not, then we're going to show a little representation on this bar that goes from here to here based on how far you are away from when you can attack. Otherwise, they're going to send you all the way back here and then progress you up based on your wait time that's inside of the actual object. So they're going to look at the wait time versus how long you have for your overall wait, and then just progress you up along this bar until you get to the point where you can attack in general. So there's nothing advanced about this. It's mainly just for display purposes, and even if you didn't have that on the screen, the enemies would still do their wait, attack, get ready for battle, and register themselves for an attack. Outside of that, there's plenty of stuff that you can look at in here for how I process, how I add attacks onto the action list from what you input, toggling interfaces on and off, trying to go through and just keeping track of what monster we're selecting when we have to make a target, processing the button controls, giving proper callbacks and bindings to the item menus and things like that we have. So like right here, we have to bind item complete and item cancel. On the item list, we have to bind the menu list selection, the spell list, the skill list. We have to bind all of our callbacks to that, so that way when you process that individual object, it can call back to the main system, so the main system knows what's going on. We got the pause menu, which you've seen before. It's just a collection of everything in general. So we got a general pause when you pause the game. This is used in battle, and when you're not in battle, you'll get this one that will show up, and it'll show the character list. So by default, everything slides down here until you start building up your party, and then you'll have to have you have to go through like the next page to be able to see the rest of your party. Not all of these will actually show up at once. Other than that, it's straightforward. We're using a button list that I created already, that Smart Object. Based on what you click here, it's going to process that. Let's see. So right now, on the button press in the menu, we call Enter Page. And depending on that page, we're going to process the exec for that page that we have selected. As you can see, not every output actually has something to do. Quick save doesn't do anything. Party tactics doesn't bring up anything because I haven't set that up yet. But otherwise, you can open your inventory page, you can open your equipment page, or the system options, or you can just exit the game out with the main menu. If I can show this somewhere. So let's say I go into my item page. If you notice, this page is a root page. This is a pause menu. So when we actually say, hey, interface, move to the pause state, we're going to say that, hey, the HUD is going to say, hey, this is the main HUD, and these other ones are children. So when we go into this one, what we're going to do is, when we say, hey, set up this page, and this is going to be the next control page for the items. So all my inputs will go to the item page and not the previous page. So when we come in here, we're going to say, hey, we want to bind to the parent on detect close. So that way, when we close this menu, the parent knows that we're done and they can do something based on us being done with this widget. We can push ourselves onto the child stack, so that way the player controller knows what the new important HUD is to be able to send information to for any kind of controller inputs or keyboard inputs. We will set ourselves visible, and then we'll set up our initial selection in this item page. And all it does is just pretty much, it sets up the party list here. It sets up our initial items for whatever index we have selected by default, and then populate the items within this smart object. And when it's done, it's going to pop itself off the stack, and this will be able to come back and, you can operate whatever other menu you want to go to from the button list. Other than that, I think I've covered the majority of everything that I can think of right now. We got the loading HUD, which is just, a loading screen so you can select your save slot or your load slot. The title screen, you can go through here and see the different the layers I have here for going back and forth between the different cameras. There should be a list of cameras in here that I trigger and go to in the menu. So every time you go over to a new option, we say, hey, just move your we do a camera blend to that new camera. So that way you can just go from one camera to another based on what option you have selected. Totally optional. If you want a flat, non-movable title screen, you can always make that. And I think that's about it. As I said, the hoverboard is experimental. You can go in here, look through it if you want to. The building generator, I have an old video on that already on my page. That has not changed. It's still, it's still there. I need to improve the meshes and materials and things like that on that. The RPG Sky I'm still working on. I mean, it technically works right now. I've done a lot of tweaking to it to be able to get better performance out of it. But there's just certain things that I need to get in there, like the ability to add clouds and stuff like that to make your environment look better in general. One thing I didn't talk about is zone triggers. Zone triggers is just what you use to go from one map to another. So if I go over here, this is a zone trigger. And what you can do for a zone trigger, you can manually type in a level name and a spawn location. So this is the name of the map that you want to load, and this is the waypoint in the other map where you want to load up. And if there's a level stream for it, you can put the level stream there, so that way it can load the level stream when you enter that map. If you don't want to use that, you can always use the map ID from the database. So as you set up these maps, they'll give you a map ID in front. So if I want to teleport to a given area or a given map, I just need to put the ID in, and it's going to go to the database and pull that information out. So it knows where to go and what the level stream and all the other information is. I mean, it's not really that much left because you got the sound cues in here. All these are the general sound cues that I have set up for the majority of the interfaces, battle start, and all of that. If you don't want these, if you don't want the sounds that's in there, or you're not using this RTK, the RPGEngineToolkit folder, pretty much all your sounds will be missing. And if you just want to start adding sounds in here without having to reprogram any of the interfaces, you can just replace the sounds here and they'll automatically update to the ones you want to be. I got a few particles in here that I've gotten from all the example kits out there. Some of them I've followed tutorials on how to use, but I just use those to give some good examples of just the usage of the system in general. A lot of these are still not well done, but for my purpose of this, they work for what they need to be. That's one thing I haven't covered yet, and that's the animation class. I'll do that in another video, and that should technically be the last one, along with the animation notifiers that I need to go over, and that should be the last video for today. Thank you.